Ma'am, I invite you to please deliver your presidential remark on the theme.
Good evening from India to everyone. I'm very honored, feeling very blessed to be a part of this GMEC session. Thanks to Dr. Archana Kumari, a very bright, brilliant academician, young academician of Media Academician of India. And as Professor Sahid Rasool said, that I'm really feeling blessed to be a part of such an occasion where a senior, professor like Dr. Geeta Bamzai, I mean, she is being felicitated, and also this is something, it's an honor for us, I think any academician in India. And yes, I do welcome everyone in this session. Dr. Ola, I'm sorry for the pronunciation. So as Archana, actually called you as Ola, Dr. Ola. So I'm also keeping that. Ms. Neha Zalali and others also. So the thing is that what Archana just said, which is really, really very important. By the way, I'm very interested. I am waiting eagerly for the young researchers to present their papers also. We are waiting for that. So yeah, welcome everyone again. And regarding this topic, which Archana has already mentioned, see, when I came to know about this topic of GMEC, so when Archana told me, I was thinking that, yes, this is the thing which we are maybe in our private discussions or in the classroom or in a few seminars and all, we are talking, but we are not taking it up that seriously. So I was really, happy when she offered me that, ma'am, if we can talk about such things. Let me tell you very frankly, it's not that I know obviously the nitty-gritty of this thing. I'm eagerly waiting for Dr. Ola to deliver his session. But yes, in two ways, we can, from two perspectives, actually, we can see this trauma literacy. And I will be whatever I'm just saying in three parts. I have actually collected few canonical data for this, which I'll be obviously sharing with you. But then yes, as the trauma, the way the journalists, they are dealing with the trauma, at the same time, when we as reader, as audience, when we get to know about the trauma, the incidents through media. So these are the two perspectives actually, which actually bother me a lot. So having said this, I would like to mention here one article, the tips for coping after reporting distressing and traumatic stories, Christina Bide, where she mentions that journalists having to report on emotionally stressful events, sometimes during their careers, that we have come across many such incidents. Some journalists take to consistently reporting about the crime rate, local and national crimes, acts of terrorism, outbreaks and pandemics. We have seen last 1.5 years we have been experiencing this, and international conflicts and reporting areas that can trigger significant emotional and mental distress among journalists. And in this article, we have seen that Dr. Gail Kinman, this quotes, I want to mention one quote, that an occupational health psychology expert, Dr. Gail Kinman, she is associated with the Birkbeck University of London, says that physical presence is unnecessary for journalists to undergo distress. This is something very important. Exposure to horrific details, graphic footage, and listening to challenging accounts during interviews can leave actually deep emotional footprints among journalists when he or she finds some resonance between the story and personal experience or awareness. Dr. Kinman also holds that while journalists demonstrate high levels of resilience, specific exposures can leave that crestfallen. Sleeping disorders, fatigue, headaches, nightmares, disturbing thoughts, and even muscular tension become manifestations. I mean, these are the things we all should be, well aware of. Journalists also find it challenging to fulfill deadlines and suffer from a lack of concentration with a disturbed mind. Depression, some also experience panic attacks and anxieties. I mean, while reading this article, while collecting this chemical data, I was just thinking, how many of us are actually thinking about all such things, on regular basis? In a work, Journalism on the Spot, Ethical Dilemmas when covering trauma and the implications of journalism education, have seen that it has emphasized newly inducted journalists not being adequately prepared to handle their own emotions when reporting about tragedies, death, violence, and crime. This article actually points out this reality, where the gap between what is taught in journalism and media studies classrooms and what exists in reality. Yes, we do talk about objectivity, we do talk about media ethics and all, but how many of us actually are relating this to with such trauma education? And such a lack of preparedness is prominent in the domain of trauma handling. And Beeman spread in an article that managing vulnerability, job satisfaction, moral and journalist mentioned, and reactions to violence and trauma, they have observed these lack being the reason for fresh professionals who remain unsure about how to report distressful events and handle interviewing of victims of a tragedy or crime. This leaves them actually exposed to post-reporting breakdowns, burnouts, nagging feelings of guilt, and maybe post-traumatic stress disorder. There's a report of the DIRT Center for Journalism and Trauma that existing research there in the report indicates nearly all journalists having experienced trauma post-reporting about specific events. About 92% of professionals have reported having gone through 4 such episodes, and for some, numbers are more high. Research also indicates, taking into consideration differences existing from one region to another, journalists on average have experienced traumatic feelings a minimum of 4 times and a maximum of 81 times. In terms of the event, which prove to be emotionally stressful on journalists, the DIRT node lists fire breakouts, accidents, disasters, incidents of murder, national or international wars, graphic and disturbing images, mass killing or executions, and executions in general as being the prime trigger points. Events involving children and women also tend to have a deleterious effect on journalists' mental health. So we have seen that in these note reports, journalists being susceptible to trauma for more physical reasons. As per the reports of the Reporters Without Borders from 2018, over 340 journalists were arrested globally, with some being subjected to torture, isolation, misbehavior, and mistreatment. Such experiences, more often than not, leave journalists on an emotional low. Another study from 5 years back, 2016, involving 977 women reporters, found that over 21% of participants had faced physical assault and 14% had undergone sexual exploitation and violence. And this can be expected to harm the mental well-being of the journalists. Furthermore, their lack of awareness about coping with such professional-related trauma leaves them helpless. This highlights the need to include interventions to enhance literacy about trauma and its handling among journalists, which Archana just mentioned. So now what it is about literacy about trauma? About what benefit occurs from literacy about trauma? If we see the article on trauma training in Australia and New Zealand, necessary but confusing, we have seen that it mentions equipping journalists to better handle themselves and victims during stressful incidents and events. Such reporters take care of themselves better when feeling emotionally down and also aid others in overcoming negative emotions. And also, the literacy about trauma positions journalists to stay better alert about the adverse impact specific incidents can have on them and the victim, which assists them in deciding on the best way to go about reporting on the incident while protecting themselves and the subject. Such knowledge also enhances the self-awareness of journalists as they can better ready early signs of distress within them and among those they are interviewing or reporting about. Such detection also makes it possible for early intervention to control the adverse impact. Researchers hold that incorporating trauma literacy during the educational stage allows journalists to inculcate healthy coping habits and behavior, which becomes beneficial when exposed to profession-related trauma. However, scholars have warned that not all literacy initiatives have the desired effect on the professionals. They state that other factors must also combine with trauma knowledge to protect reporters from its fallout. And according to specific accounts, support of media houses and organizations, adequate training to handle field situations, and awareness about trauma and its facets are vital ingredients of success. So, and these are the things, all these things are actually very, very important, and we all should be thinking about it in our course curricula. These also include the emotion-focused strategies which prepare want to express the emotion they are feeling and following their state, seek help to overcome or counter such feelings. The next is avoidance strategy, which essentially involves withdrawing or disengaging from any event or incident which has the potential of leaving behind an emotional scar. In this approach, journalists can either deny reporting on such events or disjoin themselves from the victim of the happening if they have to report as part of their call of the duty. And the third is the problem-focused strategy about preparing adequately before embarking on covering a piece, which is very important. And in this approach, details are out about what has to be reported, distressful elements on the issue, and subsequent planning about how to be reported. And how to best protect oneself from getting affected by the aftermath of what has happened. The problem is thus the first sort out and the necessary planning is done to cover against it. I would like to mention one article here that trauma journalism education, teaching merits, curricular challenges, and instructional approaches, where we have seen the introduction of a dedicated curriculum for building literacy about trauma among budding journalists may not be a feasible pragmatic option across most courses. But nevertheless, they also state that not having a session or chapter on this subject is undesirable. So to whatever extent possible and practical, these aspects should be included in the syllabi to get exposure to this topic and also develop a basic understanding of how they should handle trauma when faced with it in their professional lives. So a survey conducted in 2013 shows that among educators imparting journalism and media related courses, in this article, 50% of the participants informed researchers about trauma literacy not receiving adequate attention in the course curriculum. So in most cases, it did not even mention topics covered over the entire course duration. Researchers had even asked his teachers to submit the curriculum they taught. So analyzing the submitted documents, they concluded that reporting about crisis and trauma was hardly covered in the courses. So whenever it did find inclusion, it was in the specific context of either terrorist attacks and national or international war. So that crisis can present itself in different forms, and different contexts have been overlooked majorly. So this keeping a host of local issues which can be traumatic out of coverage. So I would conclude my deliberation with one mentioned canonical data from fostering trauma literacy from the classroom to the newsroom. I mean, just the way forward. So here I can see that how the gap between the two walls can be actually addressed as far as trauma literacy is concerned. So based on a conducted study involving journalists, so here it has been indicated the viewpoint about trauma literacy being best learned on the job. So while there may be truth in this version, it also helps if an essential awareness about the aspect is developed within media students in academic programs. And these can be viewed as wake-up calls to young professionals to minimize adverse outcomes. Sessions with industry, hard journalists, and narration of their accounts of trauma and its handling can broaden students' understanding and prepare them for the real world of reporting. Simulation of actual life events and role playing are also ways students can be helped in grasping the key messages. Another approach outlined is initiating discussions in the classroom about ethical dilemmas in reporting, the way to report ethically and factually, avoiding unnecessary sensationalization of events, and being empathetic towards the victim and such topics. So exchanges will aid students in building their perspectives towards what is credible and appropriate reporting and their approach. And discussion about the post-traumatic syndrome and mental well-being also needs to be undertaken, even if to the degree which will not make students cringe or feel embarrassed. Thank you. So I just wanted to share my thoughts on this. Yes.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for such an academic